You know that feeling when your entire world collapses in a single phone call? When everything you thought was safe, everything you believed in just shatters? That's exactly what happened to me on a cold Tuesday morning in March. I was thousands of miles away from home, living my dream, working on a project I'd sacrificed everything for. And that's when my phone rang. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, sweet old Mrs. Chen, who'd lived next door to my family for over 30 years. The woman who used to bake cookies for me and my brother when we were kids. Her voice was shaking when she spoke. Sweetheart, I don't know how to tell you this, but there are people at your house. Moving trucks. They're taking everything out. I remember laughing, actually laughing, because it had to be a mistake, right? Some kind of confusion. Maybe my brother Derek was just, I don't know, renovating? Rearranging furniture? Mrs. Chen, I think you're confused, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That's our family home. Derek's probably just. No, honey, her voice cracked. They have paperwork, legal documents. They're saying the house has been sold. And Derek is standing right there, watching them pack everything up. He's not stopping them. The world stopped spinning. My family home, the house where my parents raised us, the house where mom planted roses in the garden every spring, the house where dad taught us to ride bikes in the driveway, the house where we celebrated every birthday, every holiday, every milestone, the house my parents left to both of us when they passed away 3 years ago. Derek was selling it without telling me? I ended the call with Mrs. Chen and immediately tried calling my brother, straight to voicemail. I called again, voicemail, again, voicemail. 15 times I called him. 15 times he ignored me. That's when the panic really set in. See, I need to back up a little bit here to explain how we even got to this moment, because this wasn't just about a house. This was about trust, about family, about a betrayal so deep it would change everything forever. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 32 years old. My brother Derek is 35. We grew up in a small suburban town in a beautiful two-story house with a white picket fence and a big oak tree in the backyard. Sounds like a fairy tale, right? It was, until our parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. Mom and Dad were good people. Hardworking. They ran a small local business together, a bookstore that was the heart of our community. They weren't rich, but they were comfortable, and they were smart. They had life insurance, they had savings, and they had that house fully paid off, worth about $800,000 in our rapidly growing neighborhood. When they passed, they left everything to Derek and me, split 50-50, equal shares. The bookstore, the savings, the house, everything divided fairly because that's what good parents do. They don't play favorites, they don't create resentment, they make sure both their children are taken care of. But here's the thing about Derek, my big brother, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in anyone's eyes. Derek had always been, let's call it, financially irresponsible. That's the nice way to put it. He'd blown through 3 different business ventures in his 20s. Each time, mom and dad bailed him out. He'd gotten into credit card debt so deep he couldn't see daylight. They paid it off. He'd bought a luxury car he couldn't afford, a condo in the city he lost in foreclosure, invested in cryptocurrency schemes that crashed and burned. Every single time, our parents rescued him. And every single time, they'd pull me aside and say, Sarah, please don't judge your brother. He's just trying to find his way. He'll figure it out. I never judged him. I loved him. He was my brother. But after our parents died, things got complicated. We sold the bookstore. Neither of us wanted to run it. That gave us each about $200,000. Derek blew through his share in less than a year. New car, designer clothes, trips to Vegas, investments that never panned out. Meanwhile, I saved mine. I used it to fund my career as an architect, to build my portfolio, to invest in my future. The house was different, though. We both agreed we weren't ready to sell it. Too many memories, too much emotion. We decided to keep it, maintain it together, and maybe one day, when we were both ready, we'd sit down and make a decision as a family. Derek was living there. I'd moved to New York for work, chasing my dreams, building my career. I was fine with him staying there, honestly. I thought it was good. The house wouldn't be empty, he could take care of it. We'd split the property taxes and maintenance costs, except Derek stopped paying his share about a year ago. At first, it was small. Hey, Sarah, I'm a little short this month. Can you cover the property tax? I'll pay you back next month. Next month came and went. No payment. Then it was the insurance, then the utilities, then the repairs. I paid for everything, every single bill, because what else was I supposed to do? Let our parents' house fall into disrepair? Let it get foreclosed on? I couldn't do that. I confronted Derek about it several times over the phone. He always had an excuse. I'm between jobs. I'm starting a new business. Things are tight right now. Always a story, always a promise to pay me back soon. I believed him because he was my brother, and that was my first mistake. So there I was, standing in my tiny New York apartment, staring at my phone, unable to reach Derek, while Mrs. Chen's words echoed in my mind. They're saying the house has been sold. I booked the first flight home. 6 hours later, I was in a rental car, driving through the familiar streets of my childhood, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. When I pulled up to the house, the moving trucks were gone, but there was a sign on the lawn that made my blood run cold. Sold. And standing on the porch, locking the front door for what I assumed was the last time, was my brother, Derek. I don't remember getting out of the car. I don't remember walking up the driveway. All I remember is standing in front of Derek, my whole body shaking, and asking the question I already knew the answer to. What did you do? Derek turned around slowly, and I swear to you, I will never forget the look on his face. Not guilt, not shame, not even surprise that I'd shown up. It was annoyance, like I was inconveniencing him. Sarah, what are you doing here? What am I doing here? My voice came out as a whisper. This is my house, Derek. Ours. What are you doing? Why is there a sold sign on our parents' lawn? He sighed. Actually sighed, like I was being dramatic. Look, I was going to tell you. Tell me what? That you sold our family home without my permission, without even a conversation? It's not that simple. Yes, it is. I was screaming now. I didn't care if the neighbors heard. I didn't care about anything except the fact that my own brother had just destroyed the last piece of our parents we had left. This house belongs to both of us. You can't just sell it. That's illegal. How did you even... And then it hit me. The power of attorney, I whispered. 6 months ago, Derek had called me in a panic. He said he needed to refinance some personal debt, and the bank required paperwork. He needed me to sign a limited power of attorney so he could handle some financial documents on my behalf, since I was in New York and he was local. It was supposed to be temporary, specific, just for that one transaction. I'd signed it, because he was my brother, because I trusted him. You used the power of attorney, I said, my voice hollow. You forged my consent to sell the house. Derek's jaw tightened. I didn't forge anything. You gave me legal authority. For a bank loan, not to sell our parents' house behind my back. I needed the money, Sarah. 4 words. That's all he said. Like that explained everything. Like that justified everything. You needed the money, I repeated slowly. So you sold our childhood home, the house Mom and Dad worked their entire lives to pay off, the house they left to both of us. You sold it because you needed money? You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Pressure? I was screaming again. I've been paying every single bill on this house for over a year, every tax payment, every insurance premium, every repair. Where were you when the roof needed fixing? Where were you when the pipes burst last winter? I paid for everything. And I'm grateful. Grateful. You think I want your gratitude? I want my home back. Derek's face hardened then. The mask slipped, and I saw something in my brother's eyes I'd never seen before. Something cold. Something selfish. The house is sold, Sarah. The papers are signed. The buyers took possession this morning. It's done.
How much? My voice was shaking now, not with anger anymore, with something worse, with heartbreak. How much did you sell it for? $750,000. $750,000 split between two people should have been $375,000 each, enough to change someone's life, enough to honor our parents' legacy. Where's my half? I asked quietly. Derek looked away. Derek, where is my half? I used it to pay off debts. The world tilted. You used my share to pay your debts? They were serious debts, Sarah. I owed the wrong people. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. I was crying now, full on sobbing. You could have talked to me. You could have asked for help. You could have figured out literally anything except stealing from your own sister. I didn't steal. Yes, you did. You stole my inheritance. You stole my home. You stole the last piece of mom and dad I had left. I stared at my brother, this stranger standing in front of me, this person who shared my DNA but clearly shared none of my values, none of my respect for family, none of my love for the people who raised us. I paid for everything, I said quietly. For over a year, I paid every single bill on this house: property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, everything, while you lived here rent-free. And this is how you repay me? I'll pay you back.
With what money, Derek? You just told me you used my entire share to pay off your debts. What do you have left? He didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. He had nothing. He'd taken everything, my money, my trust, my family home, and he had nothing to show for it except his own selfishness. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling a lawyer. Sarah, no more excuses, no more stories, no more lies. You committed fraud. You forged legal documents. You stole $375,000 from me, and I'm going to make sure you answer for it. Please, Derek said, and for the first time I heard something like fear in his voice. Please don't do this. I'm your brother. I looked at him, really looked at him, at this man who'd thrown away our relationship for money, who'd betrayed me in the worst possible way, who'd destroyed our family for his own gain. No, I said quietly, a brother wouldn't do what you did. You're just someone I used to know. I turned and walked back to my car. Derek called after me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't, because if I did, I might have collapsed right there on the driveway, where Dad taught us to ride bikes all those years ago. I drove to a hotel, checked in, sat on the bed, and cried for 3 hours straight. But then I stopped crying, because something else took over, something cold and focused and determined. If Derek wanted to play games with legal documents and betrayal, then fine, I'd play too. But I was going to win. The next morning, I woke up with a singular purpose: take back what was mine. The first person I called was Patricia Chen, my parents' old attorney. She'd handled their estate after they passed. She knew the terms of their will. She knew that Derek and I were supposed to be equal beneficiaries. Patricia listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Sarah, she finally said, her voice grave, what your brother did is criminal fraud. He used a limited power of attorney for a purpose it wasn't intended for. He sold a joint property without proper authorization, and if he kept your portion of the proceeds, that's theft, grand larceny to be specific. Can I sue him? You can do more than sue him. You can press criminal charges, but I need to be honest with you. Even if you win a civil lawsuit, even if he's convicted criminally, getting your money back will be difficult if he's already spent it. My heart sank. So he gets away with it? I didn't say that. Patricia's voice took on a sharper edge. What I'm saying is that we need to be strategic. We need to build an airtight case, and we need to move fast before he has time to hide assets or flee. Tell me what to do. Patricia laid out the plan. First, we needed documentation. Every piece of communication between Derek and me regarding the house. Every payment I made towards taxes, insurance, and maintenance.
Every text message, every email, every voicemail where he promised to pay me back or admitted he was behind on his share of the expenses. Second, we needed to prove the power of attorney was used fraudulently. I'd signed it for a specific, limited purpose, to handle one banking transaction. Derek used it to sell an entire property. That wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. Third, we needed to trace the money. If Derek really used my share to pay off debts, we needed to know whose debts, how much, and whether any of that money could be recovered. Fourth, and this was the nuclear option, we could potentially file a claim against the title insurance company. If the sale of the house was fraudulent, the buyer's title insurance might be invalidated. That would open up a nightmare scenario where the buyers could lose the house and they'd come after Derek for their money back.
That would destroy him financially, Patricia said quietly. He'd be on the hook for the full sale price, plus legal fees, plus damages. He'd probably end up bankrupt, maybe even in prison. Good, I said, and I meant it. I spent the next 2 weeks building my case like I was preparing for war. I downloaded every bank statement from the past 3 years, every payment I'd made toward the house, property taxes, insurance premiums, the new roof, the plumbing repairs, the HVAC maintenance. I created a spreadsheet documenting every penny. It came to over $68,000 that I'd paid, while Derek contributed nothing. I pulled every text message from Derek, the ones where he promised to pay me back next month, the ones where he said he was going through a rough patch, the ones where he admitted he owed me big time. I had 2 years of broken promises in writing. I retrieved the limited power of attorney document from my files. It was crystal clear. This power of attorney is granted solely for the purpose of executing documents related to refinancing personal debt with First National Bank and shall expire 30 days from the date of signing. Derek had used it 6 months later to sell a house. Any lawyer worth their salt could see that was fraud. I hired a private investigator. I know that sounds dramatic, but Patricia recommended it. We needed to know where Derek's money went. If he'd really used my share to pay off debts, we needed proof. And if he hadn't, if he'd spent it on himself, that would make the fraud even worse. The private investigator's name was Marcus, former cop, now private sector. He was expensive, but Patricia said he was the best. Marcus worked fast. Within a week, he had a preliminary report. Derek hadn't paid off debts. Not really. Yes, he'd made some payments to credit card companies, about $40,000 worth, but the rest, the other $335,000, he'd bought a new luxury car, $75,000. He'd put a down payment on a condo in the city, $150,000. He'd gone on vacation to the Bahamas with his girlfriend, $20,000. He'd invested in another cryptocurrency scheme, $50,000, gone within 2 months. The remaining $40,000, gambling, sports betting apps, online poker, all gone. My brother hadn't used my inheritance to save himself from dangerous loan sharks or criminal debt collectors. He'd used it to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford, a lifestyle built on my money, on our parents' legacy. I sat in my hotel room reading Marcus's report, and something inside me went ice cold. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This wasn't just about the money. This was about Derek showing me exactly how little I meant to him, how little our family meant to him, how little our parents' sacrifices and hard work meant to him. He'd traded it all for a car, a condo, a vacation, a high-roller fantasy. I called Patricia. I want to press charges, I said. Criminal charges. I want him prosecuted for fraud, forgery, and theft. And I want to sue him for every penny he stole from me, plus damages, plus legal fees. Sarah, Patricia said carefully, if we do this, there's no going back. Derek will likely go to prison. He'll lose everything. His credit will be destroyed. He'll carry a felony conviction for the rest of his life. He should have thought about that before he betrayed his sister. I need you to be sure. I thought about Mom, about how she used to bake chocolate chip cookies every Sunday and fill the house with the smell of vanilla. I thought about Dad, about how he taught us to ride bikes, how he'd run alongside us with his hand on our backs until we found our balance, and how he never let us fall.
I thought about the family dinners around that old oak table, the Christmases by the fireplace, the birthday parties in the backyard. I thought about the house, our house, the foundation of our family, sold off like it meant nothing. I'm sure, I said. Patricia took a breath. Okay, let's bring him down. Filing criminal charges against your own brother is not something you do lightly. I want you to understand that. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about being petty or vindictive. This was about justice, about holding someone accountable for violating the law and destroying the trust of the only family he had left. But I won't lie to you. It felt awful. Patricia connected me with a prosecutor in the district attorney's office named Michael Torres. He specialized in fraud and white-collar crime. When I laid out my case for him, the forged power of attorney, the unauthorized sale, the stolen inheritance, his eyes lit up. This is textbook fraud, forgery, grand larceny, possibly even elder abuse if we can argue he exploited the power of attorney in a way that dishonored your parents' estate. Can you prosecute? Can I? I'd love to. This is exactly the kind of case that needs to be made public. People need to understand that family doesn't give you the right to steal. Within 2 weeks, the district attorney's office filed formal charges against Derek Mitchell. 1 count of forgery in the second degree, 1 count of grand larceny in the second degree, 1 count of fraud in the sale of real property, 1 count of abuse of power of attorney. Each charge carried significant prison time. If convicted on all counts, Derek was looking at up to 15 years.
The day Derek was arrested, I was in Patricia's office, going over the civil lawsuit we were preparing to file simultaneously. My phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Chen. "Sarah, honey, there are police cars at the house. They're arresting Derek." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. "Thank you for letting me know, Mrs. Chen." I should have felt victorious. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt empty. This was my brother, the person I'd grown up with, the person I'd loved my entire life, and I'd just had him arrested. But then I remembered the look on his face when I confronted him, that cold, dismissive annoyance, the way he'd said I needed the money like that justified everything, the way he'd stolen from me without a second thought, and the emptiness hardened into resolve. Derek made bail, somehow. I later found out his girlfriend's parents paid for it, $25,000. I wondered if they knew what he'd done. I wondered if they cared. His lawyer reached out to Patricia within 48 hours. The conversation was short. Derek's attorney, a slick-looking guy named Richard Pembroke, wanted to negotiate a settlement. "Your client committed multiple felonies," Patricia said coldly. "What exactly is there to negotiate?" "My client is willing to repay Miss Mitchell her full share of the home sale, $375,000 plus interest, in exchange for her dropping the criminal charges and the civil suit." I was listening on speakerphone. I almost laughed. "Where is your client going to get $375,000? I asked. "According to my investigation, he's already spent it all. He doesn't have that kind of money." There was a pause. Pembroke clearly hadn't expected me to be on the call. "My client has assets. He can liquidate—" "I bought a car and a condo with my money," I interrupted. "Is he planning to sell those? Because even if he does, they've depreciated. The car lost value the second he drove it off the lot, and the condo market is down. He'd be lucky to break even, let alone come up with $375,000 plus interest." Another pause, longer this time. "Miss Mitchell, I understand you're angry." "You're right, I am angry. My brother stole my inheritance. He destroyed my family home. He committed fraud. And now he wants to avoid the consequences by making promises he can't keep. Tell your client the answer is no. No settlement, no negotiation. He's going to trial, both criminal and civil." I hung up. Patricia looked at me with something like admiration. "You're tougher than I thought." I learned from the best. My parents didn't raise me to let people walk all over me, not even my own brother. The civil lawsuit we filed was equally devastating. Breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of property, unjust enrichment, fraud and intentional misrepresentation, breach of trust.
We weren't just asking for the $375,000 Derek had stolen, we were asking for punitive damages, for the $68,000 I'd paid in maintenance costs while he lived there rent-free, for emotional distress, for legal fees. In total, we were suing Derek for $1.2 million. Was it excessive? Maybe. But here's the thing about punitive damages. They're meant to punish wrongdoing so severe that the defendant needs to be made an example of. Derek had committed fraud against his own sister. He'd stolen an inheritance left by our deceased parents. He'd violated every bond of family and trust. If anyone deserved to be punished, it was him. The lawsuit hit Derek like a bomb. His girlfriend left him within a week. Apparently, she'd had no idea what he'd done, and when she found out, she wanted nothing to do with him. Can't say I blamed her. Derek's credit was already trashed from his previous bad decisions, but now banks were freezing his accounts pending the outcome of the criminal case. The condo he'd bought, the bank initiated foreclosure proceedings because he'd used fraudulent funds for the down payment. The car, repossessed within 3 weeks when he couldn't make the payments. Everything Derek had bought with my money was disappearing, and he was left with nothing but criminal charges and a civil lawsuit that would haunt him for the rest of his life. His lawyer called again. This time, Pembroke sounded desperate. "Miss Mitchell, please, my client is willing to do anything. Community service, public apology. He'll sign over any remaining assets." "He doesn't have any remaining assets," I said flatly. "He spent everything. That's the problem. He'll work out a payment plan." "For how long? 10 years? 20? 30? I'm 32 years old. By the time your client pays me back, I'll be retired. That's not justice, that's a joke." "Then what do you want?" I thought about that question for a long time. What did I want? I wanted my house back, but that was impossible. A family was living there now, innocent buyers who had no idea they'd purchased a fraudulently sold property. I wanted my parents back, but that was impossible too. I wanted my brother back, the Derek I grew up with, the one who used to protect me from bullies, the one who taught me to swim, the one who stayed up late with me the night before my college entrance exams, quizzing me on math formulas until I knew them by heart. That Derek was gone. Maybe he'd never really existed. Maybe I'd just been too blind to see who my brother really was. "I want justice," I finally said. "I want your client to face the consequences of what he did. I want him to go to trial. I want a jury to hear how he stole from his own sister, and I want him to serve every single day of whatever sentence he gets." I hung up. Patricia nodded slowly. "The trial is set for 8 weeks from now. Criminal case first, then civil. Are you ready for this?" Was I ready? Ready to watch my brother be paraded in front of a courtroom? Ready to testify against him? Ready to recount every detail of his betrayal in front of strangers? "Yes," I said. "I'm ready, because sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is the right thing." The day of the trial arrived faster than I expected. 8 weeks of preparation, 8 weeks of reviewing documents, rehearsing testimony, steeling myself for what was coming. 8 weeks of not sleeping, not eating properly, not doing anything except obsessing over this case. The courthouse was downtown, an imposing granite building that looked exactly like every courthouse you've ever seen in movies. Cold, impersonal, all sharp angles and heavy doors.
I wore a simple navy suit. Patricia's advice. "Look professional but sympathetic," she'd said. "The jury needs to see you as the victim, not as someone seeking revenge." But wasn't I seeking revenge? Wasn't that what this whole thing was about? No, I had to keep reminding myself. This was about justice, about accountability, about making sure Derek couldn't do this to anyone else ever again. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, about 50 seats for spectators, a judge's bench that loomed over everything, 2 tables facing the judge, one for the prosecution, one for the defense. And there, sitting at the defense table in a cheap suit that didn't fit him properly, was Derek. He looked awful. I know I shouldn't have cared, but I noticed anyway. He'd lost weight, his hair was longer, unkempt, there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. "Good," a voice in my head whispered. "He should suffer." Derek's eyes found mine across the courtroom. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the brother I used to know, the one who'd held me when I cried after my first heartbreak, the one who'd driven 8 hours to help me move into my first apartment. Then he looked away, and the moment was gone. The trial began with opening statements. Michael Torres, the prosecutor, stood up and addressed the jury with the kind of quiet authority that comes from years of experience. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a case about betrayal. Not just any betrayal, but the worst kind, the betrayal of family, the betrayal of trust. The defendant, Derek Mitchell, committed fraud against his own sister. He forged legal documents. He sold property that didn't belong to him alone. And he stole $375,000 that was rightfully hers. This isn't a complicated case. The evidence is clear, the defendant's guilt is clear, and by the end of this trial, I'm confident you'll agree that justice must be served. Richard Pembroke, Derek's lawyer, stood next. He was good, I'll give him that. Smooth, charming, the kind of lawyer who could make you doubt your own memory. Ladies and gentlemen, my client made a mistake. He admits that. But this isn't the criminal conspiracy the prosecution wants you to believe. This is a family dispute that got out of hand. Derek Mitchell was drowning in debt. He made a panicked, stupid decision to sell the family home, believing he could sort everything out later. Was it wrong? Yes. Was it illegal? That's what we're here to determine. But was it malicious? Absolutely not. This is a man who loved his sister, who never intended to hurt her, who simply made a terrible error in judgment during the worst period of his life. I wanted to scream. Never intended to hurt me? He'd stolen my inheritance. He'd lied to my face. He'd ignored my calls while moving trucks emptied our parents' house. But I stayed silent. Patricia had warned me. The trial is theater, she'd said. The defense will try to paint Derek as sympathetic. Your job is to remain calm, credible, and consistent. The prosecution called its first witness, Mrs. Chen. Sweet Mrs. Chen, who'd lived next door for 30 years, took the stand looking nervous but determined. Michael Torres walked her through what she'd witnessed the day the house was sold. I saw moving trucks, Mrs. Chen testified. Men carrying furniture out of the house, Sarah's house. I was confused because Sarah was in New York, so I called her. And while I was on the phone with her, I saw Derek standing on the porch, just watching, not stopping them, not doing anything. Did Mr. Mitchell seem upset? Michael Torres asked. No, Mrs. Chen said quietly. He seemed relieved, like he was happy it was happening. Pembroke cross-examined her, trying to suggest she'd misunderstood what she saw, but Mrs. Chen held firm. I know what I saw, and what I saw was a young man selling his sister's home without her knowledge. Next came the bank representative who'd processed the sale. He confirmed that Derek had used a power of attorney to authorize the transaction. He confirmed that I'd never been contacted. He confirmed that Derek had received a check for the full $750,000 deposited into an account in his name only. Did the bank verify the power of attorney was legitimate? The banker said. We confirmed it was notarized and appeared legally valid. We had no reason to believe it was being used fraudulently. Then came Marcus, my private investigator. He presented his findings: the luxury car purchase, the condo down payment, the vacation, the cryptocurrency, the gambling. In your professional opinion, did Derek Mitchell use the proceeds from the home sale to pay off legitimate debts as he claimed? No, Marcus said firmly. Approximately $40,000 went to credit card payments. The remaining $335,000 was spent on personal luxuries and speculative investments, none of which benefited my sister. Pembroke tried to discredit Marcus, suggesting he was biased because I'd hired him, but the financial records spoke for themselves. Credit card statements, car purchase agreements, condo contracts, bank transfers to cryptocurrency exchanges, gambling app transaction histories. Derek had spent my inheritance like a lottery winner on a spree. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like they might give out any second. The bailiff swore me in, I put my hand on the Bible, and promised to tell the truth, as if I'd do anything else. Torres began gently.
He asked about my relationship with Derek growing up, about our parents, about their deaths and the inheritance they'd left us. I answered honestly. We were close, I said. I loved my brother. I trusted him completely. When did you first learn that the family home was sold? When my neighbor called me. I was in New York. She told me there were moving trucks at the house. I couldn't believe it. I called Derek 15 times. He never answered.
Did you give Derek permission to sell the house? Absolutely not. That house belonged to both of us. It was our parents' legacy. I would never have agreed to sell it without a conversation, without a plan, without understanding where the money was going. Did you sign a power of attorney giving Derek authority to sell the house? No. I signed a limited power of attorney for him to handle one specific banking transaction. It was supposed to expire after 30 days. He used it 6 months later to sell an $800,000 property. Torres presented the power of attorney document, had me read the specific limitation clause. The jury listened carefully. Then Torres asked the question I'd been dreading. How did it feel when you discovered what your brother had done? I looked at Derek. He was staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out, I said, my voice breaking. Derek wasn't just my brother. He was my best friend. We grew up together. We survived losing our parents together. And then he threw all of that away. For money. He betrayed me in the worst possible way. He stole the last piece of our family I had left. And when I confronted him, he didn't even apologize. He just said he needed the money, like that justified everything. I was crying now. I couldn't help it. The tears came and I didn't try to stop them. I paid for everything, I continued. For over a year, I paid every single bill on that house. The property taxes, the insurance, the repairs, over $68,000, while Derek lived there rent-free. And he repaid me by stealing my inheritance and spending it on cars and vacations. Torres let the silence hang for a moment. Then he said quietly, "No further questions." Pembroke's cross-examination was brutal. He tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone who'd never forgiven Derek for being the favorite child, as someone who was using this trial to punish him for childhood grievances. "Isn't it true that you resented your brother?" Pembroke asked. "No." "Isn't it true that your parents always favored Derek over you?" "That's not." "Isn't it true that you saw this power of attorney issue as an opportunity to finally get revenge on your brother for years of perceived slights?" "No." I was angry now. "I'm here because Derek committed fraud, because he stole from me. This has nothing to do with childhood resentment or jealousy. This is about a crime." Pembroke kept pushing, but I held my ground, because I knew the truth, and the truth was all that mattered. When I finally stepped down from the witness stand, I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but I'd said everything I needed to say. Derek never took the stand. Pembroke probably advised against it. Too risky, too many questions he couldn't answer without incriminating himself further. The trial lasted 3 days. 3 days of testimony, evidence, expert witnesses. 3 days of reliving the worst betrayal of my life. And then it was over. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. On the count of forgery in the 2nd degree, we find the defendant guilty. My heart was pounding. On the count of grand larceny in the 2nd degree, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty, guilty, guilty. On every count. Derek Mitchell, my brother, was a convicted felon. The sentencing hearing was held 3 weeks after the verdict, 3 weeks where Derek sat in county jail, unable to make bail a second time, 3 weeks where I tried to process what had just happened. My brother was a criminal, convicted by a jury of his peers, and now he was going to face the consequences. The courtroom was packed for sentencing. Apparently, the case had attracted local media attention. "Sister takes down fraudster brother" was how one paper had titled their article. I hated it. This wasn't entertainment. This was my life. Judge Catherine Reynolds presided over the sentencing. She was in her 60s, a no-nonsense woman with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through you.
Mr. Mitchell, she began, looking directly at Derek, you've been convicted of multiple felonies involving fraud, forgery, and theft against your own sister. Before I pass sentence, I'm going to allow both the victim and the defendant to make statements. Ms. Mitchell, would you like to address the court? I stood up. Patricia had helped me prepare a victim impact statement, but in the end, I'd written my own, because these were my words, my pain. I walked to the podium, my hands shaking. Your Honor, Derek Mitchell is my brother. He's the person I grew up with, the person I shared a childhood with, the person I trusted more than anyone else in the world, and he destroyed that trust in the worst possible way. When our parents died 3 years ago, they left us everything they had. Not because they were rich, they weren't, but because they wanted to take care of us. They wanted us to be okay. They wanted us to have security and opportunity.
Derek took that gift and threw it away. He sold our family home behind my back. He forged documents to steal my inheritance. And when I confronted him, he showed no remorse, only annoyance that I'd caught him. For over a year, I paid every single bill on that house while Derek lived there for free. I paid $68,000 in taxes, insurance, and maintenance. I did this because I loved my brother, because I wanted to protect our parents' legacy, because I believed family meant something. Derek showed me that to him, family means nothing. I was just a resource to be exploited, a bank account to be drained, an obstacle to be overcome through lies and fraud. This isn't just about money. $375,000 is a lot of money, yes, but what Derek really stole from me was my family, my trust, my sense of security. He stole my memories of our childhood, because now every happy moment is tainted by the knowledge of what he became. He stole my ability to grieve my parents properly, because instead of mourning them together, I've spent the past months fighting my own brother in court. He stole my future because that money was supposed to help me build a life, buy a home of my own, start a family, invest in my dreams. Derek took all of that from me. And for what? A car that got repossessed? A condo he's losing to foreclosure? A vacation he can barely remember? Cryptocurrency that crashed? Gambling losses? He traded his family for nothing. Your Honor, I'm not here asking for revenge. I'm here asking for justice. Derek committed serious crimes. He needs to face serious consequences, not just for what he did to me, but to deter anyone else who might think they can defraud their own family and get away with it. My parents raised us to be better than this. They raised us to value family, to protect each other, to honor our word. Derek dishonored everything they taught us, everything they stood for, everything they worked for. I miss my brother. I miss who I thought he was. But that person doesn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did, and I need to accept that and move forward. But Derek needs to be held accountable, fully, completely, without compromise. Thank you. I sat down. My face was wet. I hadn't realized I'd been crying. Judge Reynolds nodded slowly. Thank you, Miss Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell, would you like to make a statement? Derek stood. He looked broken, small, nothing like the confident man who'd stood on our parents' porch watching the moving trucks. Your Honor, I don't know what to say. Everything Sarah said is true. I did a terrible thing. I betrayed my sister. I dishonored my parents' memory. I threw away my family for money I've already lost. I was drowning in debt. I was desperate. I made horrible decisions. I told myself I'd pay Sarah back, that I'd make it right somehow. But that was just another lie I told myself to justify what I was doing. I don't expect Sarah to forgive me. I don't expect anyone to forgive me. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't give Sarah back what I stole, but I am sorry. Judge Reynolds let the silence hang for a long moment. Mr. Mitchell, I've been a judge for over 20 years. I've seen all kinds of crimes, all kinds of criminals.
But what you did is particularly egregious because you didn't steal from a stranger. You didn't defraud a corporation. You betrayed your own sister. You exploited her trust. You took advantage of her love. That kind of crime strikes at the very foundation of what holds society together. If we can't trust our own family, who can we trust? You stole $375,000 from your sister. You forged legal documents. You committed fraud on multiple levels. And according to the evidence, you spent that money frivolously with no regard for the harm you were causing. The sentencing guidelines for your crimes recommend 5 to 15 years in state prison. Your attorney has asked for leniency based on your lack of prior criminal record and your expression of remorse. But I'm not convinced your remorse is genuine. I think you're sorry you got caught, sorry you're facing consequences, not sorry for what you actually did to your sister. Therefore, I'm sentencing you as follows. On the count of forgery in the second degree, 4 years in state prison. On the count of grand larceny in the second degree, 7 years in state prison. On the count of fraud in the sale of real property, 5 years in state prison. These sentences will run consecutively for a total of 16 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to your sister in the amount of $375,000, plus the $68,000 she paid in maintenance costs, plus interest, for a total of $463,000. If you are unable to pay this restitution immediately, your wages will be garnished upon your release from prison until the full amount is repaid, plus any additional interest accrued. You will be permanently barred from serving as power of attorney or estate executor for any person in the future. Bailiff, please take the defendant into custody. 16 years. Derek's face went white. Pembroke was already standing, talking about appeals, but I could see in Derek's eyes that he knew it was over. The bailiff came forward with handcuffs. Derek looked at me one last time. I don't know what he expected to see. Satisfaction? Victory? Grief? I kept my face neutral, because this wasn't about emotions anymore. This was about justice, and justice had been served. The criminal case was over, but the civil lawsuit was just beginning. Some people asked me why I was bothering with the civil case. Derek's going to prison for 16 years, they said. He has no money. What's the point? The point was accountability, complete accountability. Yes, Derek was going to prison. Yes, he'd been ordered to pay restitution, but the criminal restitution order didn't cover punitive damages. It didn't cover my legal fees. It didn't cover my emotional distress. And most importantly, it didn't put a legal claim on every asset Derek might ever own or earn in the future. The civil lawsuit would do all of that. Patricia filed the case immediately after the sentencing. We were suing for $1.2 million. $375,000 in stolen inheritance, $68,000 in unpaid maintenance costs, $50,000 in legal fees, and $700,000 in punitive damages for fraud and emotional distress. Derek didn't even show up for the civil trial. He was in prison. Pembroke represented him, but without his client present, without any defense strategy beyond he's already being punished, the case was essentially over before it began.
The judge in the civil case, Judge Martin Hernandez, listened to our evidence, reviewed the criminal trial transcripts, examined the financial records. His ruling came down 2 months later. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Sarah Mitchell, in the full amount requested, $1.2 million plus interest, to be paid by the defendant, Derek Mitchell. Furthermore, the court orders the following: all current and future assets owned by Derek Mitchell shall be subject to immediate levy and seizure to satisfy this judgment. This includes but is not limited to bank accounts, investment accounts, real property, personal property of value, tax refunds, lottery winnings, inheritance from any source, and any other assets of value. All wages earned by Derek Mitchell upon release from prison shall be garnished at the maximum rate allowed by law until the full judgment is satisfied. If Derek Mitchell attempts to hide assets, transfer assets to third parties, or otherwise evade this judgment, he will be held in contempt of court and subject to additional penalties, including further imprisonment. This judgment shall remain in effect for the lifetime of Derek Mitchell, or until fully satisfied, whichever comes first. $1.2 million, a judgment that would follow Derek for the rest of his life. Even when he got out of prison 16 years from now, when he was 51 years old, he'd immediately start having his wages garnished. Every paycheck, a significant portion would come to me until the debt was paid. Would I ever actually collect the full $1.2 million? Probably not. Derek would likely declare bankruptcy at some point, but bankruptcy doesn't discharge court-ordered restitution for fraud. The judgment would survive, waiting, following him, a permanent reminder of what he'd done. Patricia explained it to me like this. Think of the civil judgment as a legal barnacle attached to Derek's financial life. No matter where he goes, no matter what he does, it'll be there. He'll never be able to buy a house. You'll be first in line as a creditor. He'll never be able to finance a car. You'll have a claim on it. He'll never receive an inheritance. You'll be entitled to it. Every financial move he makes for the rest of his life will be shadowed by this judgment. It sounded harsh, cruel even. But then I remembered the moving trucks, the ignored phone calls, the cold look in Derek's eyes when he said I needed the money. He'd made his choices. Now he'd live with the consequences. After the civil judgment was finalized, I found myself in a strange position. I'd won, completely. Derek was in prison. I had a court judgment for $1.2 million. I'd proven beyond any doubt that what he did was wrong. So why didn't I feel better? I returned to New York, back to my job, back to my apartment, back to the life I'd put on hold for 6 months while I pursued justice. But everything felt different now. My coworkers were supportive. We heard about what your brother did, they'd say. That's terrible. Are you okay? I'd smile and say yes, I was fine. But I wasn't fine. I couldn't sleep. Every night I'd lie awake replaying the trial, the look on Derek's face when the verdict was read, the way his voice had cracked when he said he was sorry, the image of him being led away in handcuffs. He was my brother, and I'd sent him to prison for 16 years. Was I wrong? No. Derek committed fraud. He stole from me. He deserved to be punished. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally are two very different things. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Lisa Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, funny enough. She specialized in family trauma. What you're experiencing is grief, Dr. Chen explained during one of our sessions. You didn't just lose money or a house. You lost your brother, the person you thought he was, the relationship you thought you had. That's a real loss, and it's okay to mourn it. But I'm the one who sent him to prison. How can I mourn someone I actively hurt? You didn't hurt him, Sarah. He hurt himself through his choices. You simply held him accountable. There is a difference. We spent months working through my feelings, the guilt, the anger, the sadness, the confusion, the relief, the emptiness. Slowly, very slowly, I started to heal. I threw myself into work. Architecture had always been my passion, and now it became my refuge. I worked on projects that mattered, a community center in the Bronx, a school renovation in Queens, an affordable housing development in Brooklyn. I was building things, creating things, making things better, the opposite of what Derek had done. About 8 months after the trial, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Derek, written from prison. My hands shook as I opened it. Part of me wanted to throw it away unread, but I couldn't, because despite everything, some small part of me still wanted to believe my brother was in there somewhere. The letter was short. Sarah, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to believe me, but I need to say this anyway. You were right about everything. I was selfish. I was irresponsible. I betrayed you in the worst way possible. I threw away our family for money I didn't even keep. Prison has given me a lot of time to think about who I was, about what I became, about the choices I made and the people I hurt. I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back the house or the money or the trust I destroyed. All I can do is sit here and face the consequences of my actions. I'm sorry, Sarah. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am truly, deeply sorry. I don't expect you to write back.
I don't expect anything from you ever again. I just needed you to know that you deserved better. You deserved a brother who protected you, not one who betrayed you. I hope you find peace. I hope you build a beautiful life. And I hope, someday, you can think of our childhood without it being tainted by what I did. Derek. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and didn't look at it again for months. Was he sincere? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe prison had changed him. Maybe he really was sorry. Or maybe he was just sorry he got caught and was trying to ease his own conscience. I didn't know, and honestly, it didn't matter, because Derek's apology, sincere or not, couldn't undo the damage, couldn't bring back our parents' house, couldn't restore the years I'd spent trusting him. What I needed wasn't Derek's apology, it was my own peace, and I was slowly, painfully finding it.
I started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just coffee dates, dinners, getting used to trusting people again. Then I met James. He was an engineer, kind, patient, honest. When I told him about Derek, because I had to tell him eventually, he listened without judgment. "That must have been incredibly hard," he said simply. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done. You did the right thing." "I know, but knowing something is right doesn't always make it easier." "No," James agreed. "It doesn't, but that's what makes you a good person. You did the right thing even though it hurt." We got engaged a year later. I bought a small house in Connecticut. Nothing like my parents' house. I didn't want something that would remind me of what I'd lost. I wanted something new, something mine. James helped me renovate it. We painted the walls, refinished the floors, planted a garden, created a home together. It wasn't the same as the house I grew up in, but it was something else, something better in a way. It was a home built on honesty, on trust, on choices made freely and with integrity. The civil judgment remained in effect. Every few months, I'd receive a small payment, usually $50 or $100, garnishments from Derek's prison work wages. It would take literally hundreds of years for him to pay off the full judgment at that rate, but that wasn't the point. The point was the reminder, the accountability, the permanent record that what he'd done had consequences. 2 years after the trial, I received another letter from Derek. Shorter this time. "Sarah, I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that I'm taking classes in prison, business ethics, financial planning, trying to understand where I went wrong and how to be better. I also wanted you to know that I signed papers waiving any future claim to our parents' estate or any family inheritance. If there's anything left, insurance policies, savings bonds, anything, it's all yours. I have no right to it. I hope you're doing well. Derek." I showed the letter to Patricia. "Can he actually waive claims like that?" "Yes," she said, "and honestly, it's smart on his part. Any inheritance he received would immediately be seized to pay your judgment anyway. This way, at least he can feel like he's doing something honorable." I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't know what to say. 3 years after the trial, I got married. James and I had a small ceremony in our backyard. Close friends, a few colleagues, Mrs. Chen, who'd flown out from my hometown to attend. No family, because I didn't have family anymore. Not really. But I had James, I had friends, I had a home, I had a career. I had a life. I'd rebuilt, slowly, painfully, but I'd done it. 7 years after Derek was sentenced, I received a notification from the Department of Corrections. Derek was being released early. Good behavior, prison education programs, model inmate. He'd served 7 years of his 16-year sentence, and now he was getting out. I don't know how I felt about that. Relief, anxiety, fear, some combination of all three. I didn't tell James at first. I didn't tell anyone. I just processed it, quietly, alone. Derek was going to be out in the world again, at the same time I was, breathing the same air, walking the same streets. What if I ran into him? What if he tried to contact me? What if... I was spiraling. Dr. Chen, my therapist, helped me work through it. "Sarah, you can't control what Derek does now that he's out, but you can control how you respond. You have a restraining order. He's legally prohibited from contacting you without your permission. You're safe." But it wasn't about physical safety. It was about emotional safety, about the wound that had finally started to heal, being ripped open again. 3 months after Derek's release, it happened. I was in my hometown visiting Mrs. Chen. She was getting older, and I tried to visit a few times a year. We were having coffee at a small cafe downtown, the same cafe where my parents used to take Derek and I for hot chocolate on Saturday mornings. And then I saw him, Derek, standing in line, ordering coffee. He looked different. Obviously, 7 years in prison had aged him, but there was something else too. He looked smaller, less sure of himself. He wore a simple jacket and jeans, nothing flashy, nothing expensive. He hadn't seen me yet. I could leave, just walk out, avoid the whole situation. But I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see who he'd become. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I was just curious. Derek turned with his coffee, and his eyes met mine. He froze. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, 7 years of silence hanging between us. Then, slowly, Derek walked over. He stopped a few feet away, far enough to respect my space. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I didn't know you were in town. I am visiting Mrs. Chen. How is she?" "She's fine." Another long silence. "I know I'm not supposed to contact you," Derek said. "The restraining order. I can leave if you want." I looked at him, really looked at him, at this man who used to be my brother, who'd betrayed me, who'd gone to prison, who'd lost everything. "Sit down," I said. Derek looked surprised, but carefully sat across from me. Mrs. Chen, sensing the moment, quietly excused herself. "You look well," Derek said. "I am well. I'm married now. I own a home. I have a good career. I heard. Mrs. Chen mentioned it once when she visited me in prison. I'm happy for you, really. What about you? What are you doing now?" Derek looked down at his coffee. "I'm working at a warehouse, loading trucks. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. I'm living in a halfway house, trying to rebuild my life." "The garnishments," I said, "they're still in effect?" "I know. I'm paying what I can. I know it's not much. I know it'll probably take me the rest of my life to pay you back, but I'm trying." I didn't know what to say to that. "Sarah, Derek's voice cracked. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I am sorry, deeply, truly sorry. What I did was unforgivable. I know that. I stole from you. I betrayed you. I destroyed our family. And I've spent every single day of the past 7 years living with that guilt." "Should I believe you?" I asked quietly. "You shouldn't," Derek said. "I lied to you before. I betrayed your trust. You have no reason to believe anything I say." "Then why are you telling me?" "Because it's the truth, and because I need to try, to be better, to be the brother I should have been. Even if you never forgive me, even if we never speak again, I need to try." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, of deception, of the Derek who'd stood on our parents' porch and watched the moving trucks with cold indifference. I didn't see that person anymore. Maybe he'd changed. Maybe prison had actually reformed him. Or maybe he'd just gotten better at hiding who he really was. I didn't know. And honestly, I didn't need to know. "I'm glad you're trying to turn your life around," I said finally. "I genuinely hope you succeed. But Derek, we're not family anymore. We can't be. You destroyed that. And I've moved on." Derek nodded slowly. "I understand." "I don't hate you," I continued. "I did for a long time, but I don't anymore. I just don't know you. You're a stranger who happens to share my DNA, and that's all you can ever be now." "I know," Derek whispered. I stood up. "I hope you find peace, Derek. I really do. But I can't be part of your journey. I have my own life now, my own family, and I need to protect that." "I understand," Derek said again. "Thank you for talking to me. I didn't deserve even this much." I walked away, out of the cafe, back to Mrs. Chen's house,
and I didn't look back. That night, I told James everything about the encounter, about the conversation, about how I felt. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I think so," I said. "I think I really am okay." Seeing him didn't hurt the way I thought it would. He's just someone I used to know. James hugged me. "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For being strong enough to face him, and for being strong enough to walk away." I'd walked away. From Derek, from the past, from the pain, and I'd walked towards something better. It's been 10 years now since Derek sold our family home. 10 years since the betrayal that changed my life forever. People often ask me if I regret pressing charges, if I regret sending my brother to prison, if I regret pursuing the civil judgment that will follow him for the rest of his life. The answer is no, I don't regret it. What Derek did wasn't just wrong, it was criminal, and criminals need to face consequences, regardless if they're family or strangers. But here's what I've learned through all of this. Justice and healing are not the same thing. I got justice. Derek went to prison. I won my civil case. I have a legal judgment that vindicates me completely. But justice didn't heal me. Justice didn't erase the pain of betrayal. Justice didn't restore my family or bring back the home I grew up in. Healing came from somewhere else entirely. Healing came from therapy, from working through my trauma with Dr. Chen, from learning to trust again, from understanding that Derek's actions reflected who he was, not who I am. Healing came from James, from building a life with someone who treats me with respect and honesty, from creating a home based on trust rather than obligation. Healing came from my work, from pouring my energy into creating beautiful spaces for other people.
From making the world a little bit better through what I built. Healing came from forgiveness, not of Derek, but of myself. For years, I blamed myself for not seeing the signs earlier, for trusting Derek when he said he'd pay me back, for signing that power of attorney, for being naive enough to believe family meant something. But I wasn't naive. I was loyal. I was loving. I was trusting. Those aren't flaws. Those are virtues. Derek betrayed those virtues, but that doesn't mean the virtues themselves were wrong. I've also learned this. Family is a privilege, not a right. We're taught that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that you should forgive your family no matter what they do. But that's not true. Family is earned through actions, not granted through biology. Derek was my brother by birth, but he stopped being my family the moment he chose to betray me, the moment he chose his own greed over our relationship, the moment he looked at me as a resource to exploit rather than a sister to protect. Real family doesn't do that. Real family doesn't betray you. Real family doesn't steal from you. Real family doesn't watch your world crumble and feel nothing but annoyance. I have family now. James is my family. Mrs. Chen, who called me when the moving trucks arrived, is more family to me than Derek ever was. My close friends who supported me through the trial, they're family. Family is the people who show up for you, who protect you, who honor their commitments to you. Everything else is just biology. I've also learned about forgiveness. I've forgiven Derek. Not because he deserves it, not because he's changed, not because enough time has passed, but because carrying hatred was exhausting. It was like drinking poison and expecting him to die. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean letting him back into my life. It doesn't mean pretending what he did was okay. Forgiveness just means releasing the anger, letting go of the constant mental rehearsal of his betrayal, accepting what happened and moving forward. I've forgiven Derek, but I'll never trust him again. And that's okay. Both things can be true. The final lesson. Your story doesn't end with betrayal. When Derek sold our house, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. I thought the betrayal would define me forever. I was wrong. Yes, the betrayal happened. Yes, it was traumatic. Yes, it changed me, but it didn't destroy me. Instead, it taught me who I really am. It showed me that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can stand up for myself, that I can face the hardest challenges and come out the other side. I own a beautiful home now. It's not the house I grew up in, but it's mine, built with honest money, filled with love, a place where trust and integrity matter.
I have a career I'm proud of. I design spaces that help people, that bring communities together, that make life better. I have a marriage built on honesty. James knows everything about my past, and he loves me anyway. We don't keep secrets. We don't manipulate each other. We're partners in the truest sense. I have peace, real, genuine peace, the kind that comes from knowing you did the right thing even when it was hard, the kind that comes from healing and growing and becoming stronger. Derek tried to take everything from me. In a way, he did take a lot, but he couldn't take my strength. He couldn't take my integrity. He couldn't take my ability to love and trust again. And he couldn't take my future. I took that for myself. I built it. I earned it. I created it from the ashes of his betrayal. That's the real victory. Not the prison sentence, not the civil judgment, not the legal vindication, but the life I built after he tried to destroy me. I won, and I'm still winning every single day. It's been 15 years since the day Mrs. Chen called me about the moving trucks. Derek is out of prison. He served 7 years, plus another 3 on parole. He works a regular job, lives a quiet life. We don't speak. Every month, a small amount is still garnished from his paycheck. Not enough to ever fully repay what he stole, but enough to remind both of us that actions have consequences. I hear about him occasionally through Mrs. Chen. She's in her 80s now, still living next door to the house that used to be ours. She tells me Derek visits her sometimes, helps her with yard work, brings her groceries. He's changed, she tells me. He's a good man now. Maybe he is. Maybe prison really did reform him. Maybe he learned his lesson and became a better person. I'm glad for him if that's true, but it doesn't change anything between us. James and I have 2 kids now, a daughter, Emma, who's 5, and a son, Michael, who's 3. We're raising them in our home in Connecticut, teaching them about honesty, integrity, responsibility, teaching them that family is important, but respect is more important. Sometimes Emma asks about her uncle. She's heard Mrs. Chen mention Derek. She knows I have a brother. Why doesn't Uncle Derek visit us? She asks. Because sometimes people make choices that hurt the people who love them, and when that happens, relationships change. Did Uncle Derek hurt you? Yes, he did. Did you forgive him? I did. But forgiveness doesn't mean we have to be close. Sometimes forgiveness just means letting go of anger and moving forward. Emma thinks about this. I would never hurt you, Mommy. I know, sweetheart, and I'll never hurt you either. That's what family means. Real family, not biological obligation, but chosen commitment. My parents' old house was sold again 5 years ago. The family who bought it from Derek's fraudulent sale lived there for 10 years before moving. I drove past it once, out of curiosity. It looked different. New paint, new landscaping. The oak tree in the backyard was gone. Apparently, it had died and they'd cut it down. It wasn't my home anymore. It was just a house. My home is here, with James, with Emma, with Michael, in the life we've built together. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about Derek, about the brother I used to have, about the Christmas mornings and the childhood adventures. I mourn those memories, not because they're gone, but because they're tainted now, because I can never look back at them without remembering what came after. But then I look at my own family, at the life I've built, at the person I've become, and I realize that I don't need those memories anymore. I have new ones, better ones built on truth rather than trust that was misplaced. Derek took a lot from me, but he didn't take everything. He didn't take my strength. He didn't take my integrity. He didn't take my ability to love and trust again. And he didn't take my future. I took that for myself. I built it, I earned it, I created it from the ashes of his betrayal. That's the real victory. Not the prison sentence, not the civil judgment, not the legal vindication, but the life I built after he tried to destroy me. I won, and I'm still winning every single day.